This controversial theory about Ted's narration in How I Met Your Mother will make you want to rewatch the hit sitcom. Throughout every season of How I Met Your Mother, we witness Ted Mosby share the lengthy story of how he met his future wife to their 2 children, and at the time of airing, the mother's identity was the primary focus of fans' theories. There are many TV shows we miss creating theories for, and How I Met Your Mother is one of them. Even years after the show's end, audiences are still coming up with theories about How I Met Your Mother's best episodes. However, upon realizing Ted's reliability as a narrator isn't great, it'll make you see How I Met Your Mother in a completely different way. Ted Mosby is an unreliable narrator according to a popular HIMYM theory. Penny and Luke Mosby looking confused as Ted finally finishes his story in How I Met Your Mother's finale. From early on, it's clear that How I Met Your Mother is a different type of sitcom compared to the likes of Friends. This is because of the show's storytelling device, which sees an older Ted recount his past to his children. Ted often mixes his wacky adventures up, forgets names, and has to correct himself. There are several scenes in HIMYM that support the Ted narration theory. For example, Ted doesn't remember Barbara's name is actually Carol until the very last season, and he struggles to recall which birthday of his included Lily keeping a goat in the bathroom. While these are all relatively trivial details, some of Ted's other tales are so wild that it's hard to trust his perspective. Upon closer analysis, some of the more major plots in How I Met Your Mother can be depicted in more than one way, and it makes you question what is the truth and what are simply Ted's feelings about the matter. How Ted being an unreliable narrator changes How I Met Your Mother. Tracy and Ted curled up together on the couch, falling asleep, in How I Met Your Mother. Some moments in the show will leave you questioning Ted. Looking back, How I Met Your Mother's wedding bride subplot is rather over the top. However, Ted's story also proves that Stella still cares about his well-being after she leaves him at the altar, so it's difficult to believe that she'd allow Tony to turn him into a caricature based on lies. At the same time, it's possible that Ted blows the Jed Mosely character out of proportion because he's bitter about the memory, too. The same can be said about how Robin and Barney are perceived in The Rough Patch. Perhaps Robin and Barney don't look old or fat, maybe that's just how Ted sees them at the time. Thanks to How I Met Your Mother's controversial finale, we know that Ted's story is a way for him to try to gently ease Luke and Penny into the idea of him reigniting his romance with Robin. Therefore, there's a chance that everyone's stories are biased. If Ted was so hung up on Robin, it would be easy for his judgment of her to be askew. Plus, with there being such a narrowed focus on Robin in Ted's story, it would make sense if his depictions of Lily, Marshall, and Barney weren't completely reliable either. It's worth noting that Ted recounts events from their lives that he wasn't actually aware of at the time. For example, Robin doesn't tell Ted about her infertility for several episodes, and Barney knows before him, Lily, or Marshall. In fact, the episode that focuses on this, Symphony of Illumination, is told from Robin's point of view, as she talks to her 2 non-existent children. While Ted is very respectful in recounting Robin's past struggles, his narration can't be trusted as fact. Ted doesn't know how Robin feels at that moment, and he isn't even there to witness the events play out. No matter how detailed a story Robin offers Ted, it's impossible for him to be completely correct, as he isn't actually present for these events. Why Ted being an unreliable narrator is a controversial theory. Ted, Robin, Barney, Lily, and Marshall laughing and drinking in their booth at McLaren's in How I Met Your Mother. However, many believe that calling Ted Mosby an unreliable narrator isn't completely fair. Ted is sharing incredibly in-depth details from several decades before, and without the rest of the gang nearby to correct him, it's understandable if he gets a few things wrong. His opinion of others changes depending on where in the story he is, so, of course, we see these characters differently, too. The whole point of How I Met Your Mother is Ted telling the story of how he met Tracy. But it's his story, nobody else's. Perhaps the Ericksons' game of basketball isn't as dangerous as we think, or maybe Barney's real personality throughout How I Met Your Mother isn't as extreme, but that is simply how he visualized these things. Naturally, this means certain things or people are romanticized, but this doesn't make Ted unreliable. If this is how he perceives the past, then it's not necessarily untrue. Instead, Ted could be exaggerating details simply as a way for him to keep his kids engaged with his seemingly never-ending story. Ultimately, Ted's story should be taken at face value. The truth about Ted in HIMYM is probably somewhere in the middle. Ted, dressed as a hanging Chad, and Barney, dressed as the devil, at a Halloween party on the rooftop in How I Met Your Mother. This theory has a lot of potential, but ultimately, it's more likely that Ted being an unreliable narrator is simply a result of time. Ted is thinking back on events that occurred years before he met Tracy, and before Robin and Barney's relationship in How I Met Your Mother even begins, so there will be some errors. However, I believe some of his unreliable narration is done on purpose, too. There are some stories that are way too inappropriate for Ted to properly share with his kids, so he changes the details. Other than things like sandwiches and Grinch as replacement words, Ted is also rather vague during certain stories, like when he tries to go for the belt in Third Wheel.